So I'm gonna call this, for the end of this video, a success in that it does work. I will report back in a few weeks to make a more confident answer in whether or not this truly works. But again, welcome back everyone. This will be the last video about the project to convert the valve cover in my Z4 from plastic to magnesium. So this has been a long time coming. I started this project in, I think, late spring. And unfortunately, it's taken a lot longer than I've wanted to. And a lot of that has to do with getting these parts in. I ordered these final gaskets and everything well over a month ago, and it just took forever to get in. But, you know, that's the way that shipping goes sometimes. Since then, I think I've done 6 episodes on this project. So if this is the first time you're seeing this, maybe go back and check out some of those if you see something that you have more questions about. Otherwise, you know, feel free to write something in the comments. 2 things, or one thing I really want to make clear before we actually start today's job is that I'm not doing this because I know it works. I'm doing this because I want to figure out whether or not it works. If it doesn't work, I can always put the car right back to the way that it was, because my main goal this entire time has been to make no irreversible modifications to this car. And so far, I've been able to satisfy that. The next thing is that even if it does work, I'm not saying that you should do this. I'm just showing you something that I'm doing. This is more of an exercise for fun. This is not to, you know, make the car a million times better. The car is going to be what it's going to be. The only thing this is going to do potentially is mean that I don't have to deal with a cracked plastic valve cover or a ruined CCV diaphragm in the long term, because I don't plan to ever sell this car. I plan to keep it until it dies and restore it and keep driving it. I really love this car that much. And that's why I am doing this. I want to try and make this car as bulletproof as possible, given what, you know, given the engineering that was put into it from the factory. If this does end up working and it ends up working well, I would say the best I can say for you is, assuming that you are comfortable with all that is required to do this procedure, and you are familiar with all of the tools and skills needed to do this, then you could probably go ahead and do it. If you do not have the knowledge or the skills or the tools to do this properly, I would urge you either don't do it at all or have a shop do it, if they would even take a job like this. So with all those disclaimers aside, let's get into some of the parts that I got here for this valve cover. So the main one here is the valve cover gasket with the the spark plug well gaskets. This is one of the most expensive pieces of this whole gasket set. The next most expensive are these aluminum bolts made in Germany. And these are not reusable. These are torque to yield. Once you use them and torque them fully once, you're done, partner. They're junk. So these are some big sunk costs into this project. While I'm in there, I've decided that I will be doing the throttle body gasket if I need to, if I feel like removing the throttle body. But I will almost for sure be replacing the gaskets that go around the manifold onto the cylinder head. Because I'm going to have the manifold off, I may as well replace these. The car has 100,000 miles on it, so I think that's a good idea. And then the other 2 things that I need for the valve cover itself, besides the gasket, is a new Valvetronic gasket and a new eccentric eccentric shaft sensor gasket. Because this one is different to the one that's on the plastic valve cover. And the one, the eccentric shaft sensor gasket that was on this valve cover originally was really hard, and it just wasn't going to work for me. So I got a nice brand new one here. And so let's head on over to the car and I will discuss what this project involves. Also, if you haven't noticed, this is going to be a really long video because there's a lot to do. Here is the very dusty engine bay of the Z4, and I'm going to point out some of the things that I need to do in order to do this. The intake box, the intake boots, as well as where it attaches to the resonator for the tube that goes into the cabin for the engine noise. That all is going to be removed. A lot of the wiring in this area has to be disconnected. The manifold is going to be removed. I don't know yet if I'm going to remove it completely from the car or just loosen it up to get it out of the way enough that I can work on it. But either way, it's going to be effectively coming completely out. Obviously, the vanity cover has to come off. The valve cover is going to be coming off. And then the ignition wiring harness, which runs around the back of the engine, is going to be coming off. And all the electronic stuff I have to transplant from this over to the magnesium one. I'm a little concerned because the way that they're grounded is going to be different. Obviously, the plastic valve cover has no way to ground itself to the block. I think it grounds itself through the bolts, but my assumption here is if it can ground itself with the plastic one, it should be able to ground itself just fine with the magnesium one. That's something I'm going to deal with later. I will also be removing my catch can setup because I need to remeasure and recut some hoses for that, just to make sure everything there is going to work just fine. And I think that's it. It doesn't sound like a lot, but that's going to be a lot of work. That's probably going to be at least an hour and a half or 2 hours to get all that stuff off. And it's all going to be done in time lapse because this video does not have the space for me to go over every little thing. So pay close attention. This isn't a tutorial. This is just showing you how I'm doing it. So don't expect a step-by-step here. Okay, that was quite a long time lapse. To recap what I did, if you just jumped to this spot, which actually I kind of recommend, I removed the intake air box all the way up to the sound generator, and I didn't take off this lower intake boot. I don't think I'm going to have to. I undid a bunch of these connectors for the wiring. I removed the plastic valve cover. I removed the Valvetronic unit. I replaced this one. I torqued it to 7 Newton meters. I have not gone torque to yield yet. I just want to check how it's going to work before I do that. This will be, at least I believe this will be tight enough just for testing. And then once I can confirm that it works or that I don't have any major issues that would involve removing the valve cover, then I'll torque them down permanently. I think that's all. That was like almost an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours just to do all that. And I would say I'm maybe halfway done. What's going to take longer than what I just did is getting the manifold off and making all the custom pieces, because I have to make custom hose lengths with 90-degree bend, a brass 90-degree bend, and a brass T connector, like, you know, barb fittings. I did get the barb fitting on back here, and it fits real snug with those custom O-ring things that I made. And then those are, you know, that hose is going to come up through here over to where the catch can used to sit and will sit again. It'll go back through here, and then this hose, which goes underneath in there, it's going to be a lot of work. A couple fitment issues I will mention is that this magnesium valve cover sits a little more proud than the plastic valve cover, mainly right here. I think if I knew this beforehand, I could have taken a file and filed down this ridge, and that would give me a lot more slack there. But you can see this is all crunched up this way. It's not very happy. I did undid some of the clips here. So what I plan to do is actually disassemble this whole plastic guard piece and then either wrap it with some form of heat-resistant electrical tape, or maybe even get some of the, you know, a larger diameter of this conduit to try and neaten this up, but also keep it protected. That'll be after I can confirm that this actually runs and works. So this will be good enough for now. Oh yeah, and for grounding, making sure that this here, this one over here, those are the grounding leads that ground out this circuit for the ignition. Since I painted this, there really isn't any way for electricity, or, you know, the electrons to get from the valve cover to the block or vice versa. So what I did is on the 3 center bolts where, you know, there'll be less visible, I took some acetone in a rag, and then I took my impact drill and went down in here and spun off, you know, used that rag with soaked in acetone to wipe away all of the paint underneath the spacer on that fastener. Well, all 3 of them. So it should be good and grounded. It might actually be a good idea to test that. Let me actually, you know, I'm going to test that right now just to make sure. I have my meter in continuity mode. All I have to do is go to here and then go to any grounded part of the car. Where's a good ground? Hey, look at that. I think that'll work. So looking ahead, just as a initial game plan, the way that I want to route the hosing, or at least measure it out to cut it, is I want to get the short pieces and like the 90-degree and the T connectors on the manifold correctly. And then I want to take all of the excess, all of the rest of the hose that I have, regardless of its length, and just route it back to the catch can, cut it to length, and then whatever extra I have, I can use to kind of fudge the rest. I really don't want to have to order in some new hose. I want to get this done today. So I might be willing to cut some corners for the sake of getting it done. Even though this is the last episode in this series, I will have updates as they're needed, just to make sure that I'm getting the correct information out there, even if it's not going to be all in this final video. So I think what the next thing I'm going to do is just go back to a time lapse of removing the manifold from the cylinder head. I'm not really looking forward to this. Okay, that part was relatively easy. I did have to disconnect every connection point between the fuel line and the manifold. That wasn't difficult. It would be a lot easier if I just removed the fuel line from the fuel rail, but I don't want to be messing with fuel and getting that everywhere because it's a mess. Let's just take a quick look here. Sorry, forgot the flash there. Let's take a quick look into each of the intakes. That looks very clean. Every time I've seen one of these things opened up, they're always immaculate. I don't think I've ever seen an N52 intake, well, the intake runners that are completely carboned up, unless there's a major issue with the way the car is running. This looks really good to me. So what I'm going to do is get some of the dirt wiped off from everywhere and get the intake runners plugged up with some towels just to minimize any dust that goes into the engine. Okay, I'm going to show you something that is extremely important right now. If you have one of these cars, you really need to pay attention to the next couple minutes of what I have to say. If you see right there, right here, where part of the tube from the CCV connects to, and you see this wire coming in, this is called the CCV heater. This is a part that has a high probability to fail in such a way that it will burn your car, possibly burn your garage or house down. And this is so important that BMW issued a recall. The companies do not issue recalls for no reason. The cost or the risk of failures has to be higher than the cost of ignoring it. So my official recommendation is, if you are unsure if your car has this original part, or if it has the replaced part, contact your nearest dealer as soon as possible and see if your car has, with the VIN, see if your car has been fixed with the recall. If you are unsure, absolutely replace this part. It is, if you do it yourself, it's an $80 part. The official BMW one, the revised part, is $80. That's well worth not having your car, garage, and or house all burned to the ground. Now, my unofficial recommendation is just unplug the wire right here. That may or may not cause an engine fault code. I will be unplugging mine because I don't want this thing to burn. I don't have the time to take this thing into the dealer for them to deal with this, even though it is free. That's another thing I should say, is that recall fix is absolutely free. So you make up your own mind what you think is best for you. But whatever you do, make sure that you have this part checked out. It is imperative. Here are the 6 original intake manifold runner gaskets. They are still pretty pliable, but they're not great. And it's probably a good thing to replace these now that the car is, what, 13 or something years old. Another thing I noticed is that there's a ton of oil in the intake runners, which means regardless of how this magnesium valve cover job goes, I will be keeping the catch can, that is for certain. Just to do at least one extra step to try and get oil out of the intake system, because that's actually probably what caused the O2 sensor to fail, because it was bank 2 that had more oil in the runners than bank 1. So what I'm going to do, it's probably not recommended, but I will be putting a very, very light coating of silicone grease on these just to try and keep them as soft and supple as possible and, you know, help to aid them seal a little bit. So this is the tube that goes from the CCV or valve cover outlet to the manifold inlets. So I need to recreate this geometry with these. I won't be doing it perfectly. I'll actually be doing something more like this, to where this is going to go straight into the manifold with a short piece of hose. The two will be connected by this piece of hose, and there will be another one going from here to there. It'll just kind of, more like this. It will really simplify the routing of the hose, and that way I don't need two 90s in a T. I can just use a 90 a T, and then it'll run over to the catch can. It won't be too difficult. The problem is that the connectors that these go onto are quite large, so I'm having to put a significant chamfer to increase the diameter of the inside of the hose, and also give it a smoother lead in so I can push it on more easily. It's already hard enough to push on these barb fittings, but with a little bit of oil, it should work out just fine. Quick progress update here. There's a little bit of a change of plan. The hose I have is not big enough to get around these barb-like fittings. So instead of trying to make it work, I kind of stole the connectors off of the factory piece. I did replace the O-rings in them, so they aren't brand new, but the connector itself isn't brand new, but at least it has a new O-ring. And then I'm going to be using my T-fitting, and just to show you how tight this stuff is on these fittings, that's all the further I could get it, and I was putting all my weight on it. And these are not going to come off very easily at all. So these are some pretty good fittings. And now this is going to connect up just like that. Sorry, camera angle. All right, I'm not going to click them on because they're going to be a little bit difficult to get off. And then you can see up there that that is going to go forward around the engine bay and back to the catch can. So I think I'm ready now to put the runner gaskets back in, mount everything back up, and then replace the catch can. The nice thing now is that I have an extra 90-degree piece like this, so I might consider actually doing a double 90 here instead of trying to, get the radius bend tight enough. I'm not sure it's actually going to be able to do that, but I will see soon enough. All right, this is quite a bit forward of a jump in time. I decided not to film some of the custom work here. It took too much concentration, and it would be very difficult to do that and film at the same time because I'm not a professional videographer. So, as you can see, everything is together. That's just kind of sitting there because, as you remember, those wires didn't quite fit, and there's a little bit of interference there with the grommets that hold the valve, or the vanity cover on. But I think it looks okay. I'm not as big of a fan of the silver as I am the black, but taking that off, you can see everything is complete. Yep, so you can see that hose running up and around, goes underneath the manifold. The one there goes into the catch can. Everything is ready to go, so I'm going to try the first start here, but I'm also going to double check that I got all my, actually here we go, one connector I didn't reconnect, but I will be double checking all my connectors before I start, and then I will start the engine, and hopefully I don't get any check engine lights. Here's the initial startup. Cross your fingers for me. A lot of lifter tick again, but I haven't run this car in a few days. As I've said in other videos, these cars have to run pretty hard every single day and get good and hot. Otherwise, they just don't run quite as well. Well, I have a stable idle and no check engine light. I'm going to go for a quick drive for a few miles and come back. Okay, there's still a little bit of lifter tick, well, a lot, but nothing anomalous came up. Everything felt fine. Let's see if the vacuum is correct. Yeah, I think that seems okay. So I'm going to call this, for the end of this video, a success in that it does work. But I will report back in a few weeks to make a more, a more confident answer in whether or not this truly works. But again, for now, I'm going to say yes. So I'm going to leave it here since this has already been a very long video. And until next time, see ya.